The long wait began today until the nation's highest court decides the future of the 2010 law that reshaped American health care. In the meantime, the debate continues in the presidential campaign.
We are done.
2 years ago this month, President Obama signed health care reform into law, his signature domestic policy achievement. Now, after 3 days of Supreme Court arguments, its fate is in the hands of the 9 justices, and their ruling is expected this summer. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said today that until then, nothing will change.
We're going to keep implementing this law, and the president was pleased with the presentation and remains convinced that the Affordable Care Act is constitutional.
For his part, Mr. Obama made no mention of health care during a morning appearance in the White House Rose Garden. But it remains a hot-button issue, and the court's decision could have far-reaching consequences for health coverage and the president's re-election hopes. Health care reform has also roiled the Republican race. Rick Santorum was at the Supreme Court on Monday, arguing his case that Mitt Romney is ill-suited to challenge the president on the subject.
And there's one candidate who is uniquely disqualified to make the case. It's the reason I'm here and he's not. The reason that I talk about Obamacare and its impact on the economy and fundamental freedoms, and Mitt Romney doesn't. It's because he can't, because he supported government-run health care as governor of Massachusetts.
The Massachusetts plan that Romney signed into law has long been considered a political liability among many conservatives. But the former governor has forcefully defended the program, including in Michigan last May, before he officially announced his candidacy.
I also recognize that a lot of pundits around the nation are saying that I should just stand up and say this whole thing was a mistake, that it was just a boneheaded idea, and I should just admit it. It was a mistake and walk away from it. And I presume that a lot of folks would conclude that if I did that, that'd be good for me politically. But there's only one problem with that. It wouldn't be honest.
Even so, Romney has been unsparing in his criticism of the Obama administration's approach.
Obamacare substitutes government intrusiveness for the dynamics of individual responsibility, for individuals being able to pursue different options, and for the dynamics of a free market.
The administration counters that the Massachusetts plan served as the blueprint for its effort. Here is White House senior advisor David Plouffe last weekend on NBC.
Mitt Romney's the godfather of our health care plan, okay? If he's president, remarkably, he's running away from that past, and he's going to say he's going to try and throw all this away. We're going to have a big fight about health care again. We know we have to do this for our economy, for our deficits, for the health and safety of the American people.
The Obama team is also using social media sites trying to claim for its own the Obamacare label given to the law by opponents. It's a strategy the president previewed in Minnesota last August while on a bus tour through the Midwest.
Part of the Affordable Care Act, health care reform, also known as Obamacare. By the way, you know what? Let me tell you, I have no problem with folks saying Obama cares. I do care. If the other side wants to be the folks who don't care, that's fine with me.
For now, the health care fight goes on, with both sides waiting to see how the Supreme Court's decision in June reshapes the debate. For more on how the health care debate has spilled onto the campaign trail, we turn to Washington Post reporter Amy Gardner and Brian Mooney. He's a reporter with the Boston Globe who wrote a series about the Romney plan. Brian, and thanks to you both for being with us. Brian, you have written a lot about the Mitt Romney health care plan, which the Obama team and the Rick Santorum team are saying was a basis for Obamacare, for the president's health care plan. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's accurate. It's the template that was used in the national plan. The national plan obviously has a lot of elements that the Massachusetts plan did not. It's a lot more complicated and ambitious. But the key elements, the innovations, are basically the ones that were launched in Massachusetts back in 2006.
So how would you, what are the chief comparisons between the two?
Well, the individual mandate, for one. Massachusetts is the only state to have done this, and it's a concept based in conservative or Republican circles in the 90s as an alternative to the Hillary Clinton health care plan. Bob Dole, Newt Gingrich, people like that supported it. That's a key component of the federal one as well. This idea of state-based exchanges that would provide a marketplace for commercially sold real estate insurance policies is another key feature. And so all the major features are very similar.
And Brian Mooney, just remind us, where did the idea come from for the Romney healthcare plan in Massachusetts, and how did he get it passed?
Well, as you know, Massachusetts is an overwhelmingly Democratic and liberal state. Ted Kennedy was alive, the champion of universal health care. There's a culture in the state that's very favorable towards expanding insurance. And Romney, as a Republican, took an unusual step and said he was going to make it a major initiative the second half of his term as governor. And he proposed some new ideas that, Democrats hadn't used before. It was a long process. It took about 2 years to get passed. There were fights in the legislature over it. But in the end, out of 200 state legislators, only 2 opposed it. And there was no real organized opposition to it. And so Romney gets a lot of the credit for it.
So, Amy Gardner, you've been following the other Republican candidates on the trail this year. What are they saying about the Mitt Romney health care plan?
Well, it's become the issue upon which to sort of wage make the case, argue the case that Mitt Romney is not the person to litigate health care against Barack Obama in the general election. Both Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum, as the clip a moment ago illustrated with Santorum on Capitol Hill this week, have been hammering Governor Romney on the issue day after day after day.
So meanwhile, move over to the White House, and you've been covering the Obama White House in the last few days. How concerned are they after hearing these Supreme Court arguments? What are they saying?
Well, they're not saying. In fact, it's very clear that they are executing a concerted strategy not to get in the middle of this. And so their response is, we believe the law is constitutional. We are going to continue to move toward implementation. You heard Press Secretary Jay Carney say that today. You hear the same message out of the campaign headquarters in Chicago. They're on TV saying the exact same thing. They don't want to get in the middle of the political discussion that the candidates are having and that we're having on TV shows.
Aside from the court arguments, though, and what's going on with the court, how much has the president been talking about health care reform in this campaign?
Well, any good campaign and candidate and, elected official is thinking about what the potential outcomes are of any important issue. So, of course, they're talking about it, and of course, they're thinking about what will happen if the Supreme Court overturns it and what will happen if the Supreme Court upholds it. We don't know any more than that speculation, which I feel perfectly safe putting out there. We know that he's very interested in the case. He's, of course, a constitutional scholar himself who taught constitutional law in law school, and we know that he read the briefs on his way back from Korea on Tuesday on Air Force One with great interest, I'm sure, and that's about all we know.
What about, Amy Gardner, what about the president's Democratic allies? I mean, the Democrats on the Hill. How much are they sweating this out?
It's interesting. You do hear a little bit more candor about the concern that folks have. I mean, there's fairly universal view that the arguments didn't feel like they went very well for the Democratic side this week, with the very tough questioning from the conservative justices, particularly on the individual mandate on Tuesday. And so certainly people are starting to think much more about the possibility of the court actually overturning this. And so you hear a couple different things. You don't hear any talk about how would we replace this law? The view is, look, we considered plans B, C, D, and E back in 2009, and we didn't go in those directions for very concerted reasons. We believed that this was the plan that worked. The individual mandate is the cornerstone to this bill, they say, because it allows, it requires 30 million additional people to come into the market and helps pay for some of the popular provisions of the bill, like, pre-existing conditions and all that stuff.
Brian Mooney, back to you. And by the way, we learned, I guess today, that the Supreme Court, the justices are actually going to take a vote among themselves on this Friday, but nobody will know what those results are until the opinions are written and they come out sometime at the end of June. But in the meantime, what do you think we should expect to hear from Mitt Romney about all this on the campaign trail?
Well, the great irony is, I think Romney, as he prepared to run for president in 2008, thought this achievement would be a great asset to him. It's turned out to be very much the opposite in his own party. And I think President Obama thought the national overhaul would do the same for him, and it's proved to be not very popular. But, you know, for Romney, he's standing on a narrow ground of federalism, which is about the only place he can stand, saying states should be doing this by themselves, not with a mandate from the federal government. It's a very narrow political piece of ground, and it will be interesting to see in a general election how he deals with that. But he tries to appeal to a broader audience.
But just quickly, it is felt in the Romney campaign that he can talk about it?
Well, he's not leading with it, that's for sure. As he goes for the nomination, it's been a liability, frankly. I mean, a lot of people thought it would kill his chances, which hasn't happened. But some people think it's a Republican talking about health reform is a good thing. It's a party that's not been identified with that issue. But it's a tricky ground for him.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Brian Mooney joining us in Boston, Amy Gardner here in Washington. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.